Հիմա երբ կորցնելու շեմին եմ, ինձ ոչ ձեր մեղադրանքներն են հետաքրքրում, ոչ հունանի վիրաբան։
Բացի այդ, այն սկզբից չես հիշում ինչեր էր խոսում, ինչեր էր խոստանում, որ ոչ մեկը սպարտավորություններ։
Որ ես զայրացած եմ, որ ես ամբողջ զայրույթս քո գլխին թափեմ։
Հիմա էլ այդ բուտաֆորի աղբերներին հավաքել եկել այստեղ։
Այդ արտնացի շուրջդ նայի, հասկացի ինչ ա կատարվում, գոնե հիմա տղայիդ մասին մտածի։
Չես խնդրել, ես էլ չեմ խնդրել։ Դա եղել է երկուսից ցանկությամբ։
Ինչ եղավ։ Դու ստեղ հեռախոսը, ինչ են ասում։
Դու առասարակ սիրտ ունես ինձ ինչ-որ բանում մեղադրես։
Դե լավ էլի հերիք ա էլի, իրոք հերիք ա։
Everything you think you know about this family is about to collapse because the person everyone trusts the most in that house is the one who has been lying the longest. Not Hunan, not Grish, Leo, the calm one, the peacemaker, the man who always steps between the shouting to bring silence back into the room. That man is sitting on a secret so old it predates half of this family's current pain, and it is about to surface right when nobody is prepared for it. Before we go further, tell me something quick. Drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're watching this from right now. I actually read every comment that comes in. I reply to as many as I can, and I love seeing just how far these videos end up traveling, so don't be shy, say hello. Let's look at what actually just happened, because on the surface, this looks like a story about an accident. Grish, reckless, distracted, fighting with Anya about their child, gets a phone call from Hunan threatening violence, and somewhere in that emotional storm, he loses control of the car. That is the surface story. That is what everyone standing in that hospital hallway believes right now. But watch the details again, because this show has never once given us an accident that was only an accident. Every single crash, every single hospital bed in this family's history has been connected to something deeper, something buried, something somebody didn't want found. This one is no different. Start with Mañana. This is a woman who has spent this entire season attacking everyone around her with precision, cutting Hunan down, cutting Ina down, standing in doorways daring anyone to challenge her. And then in the space of one single scene, she collapses into someone unrecognizable, repeating over and over that she is about to lose the greatest love of her life. That line does not belong to a woman simply afraid for her son. That line belongs to a woman who has lost something like this before and knows exactly what that particular kind of loss feels like before it even happens. Remember her own words, spoken almost in passing, that she had already lost so much before she was even born. Nobody in that room reacted to that sentence. Nobody asked her what she meant. But you should be asking, because a woman does not casually reference a loss from before her own birth unless that loss defines the entire architecture of who she became. Now put that next to Leo, calm, controlled, the man who talks everyone else down from the ledge. Watch what he does the instant the conversation shifts toward anything personal, anything about relationships, anything about old debts between people. He changes the subject. He goes quiet. He offers to make coffee. He does what every character in this genre does right before a secret gets exposed. He manages the room instead of engaging with it. A truly innocent man argues back when accused. A man hiding something manages the temperature of the conversation instead. Leo has been managing temperature for the entire runtime of the show, and nobody has clocked it yet because he's so likable, so steady, so exactly the opposite of what a secret keeper is supposed to look like. That's exactly the point. That's exactly why it works. Here's where it gets interesting. That phone call from Russia about a child finally found after years of searching landed in the middle of the worst possible night, right as Grish was fighting for his life. Everyone assumed, naturally, that this child belongs to Grish, some earlier relationship, some earlier mistake finally catching up to him at the worst possible time. But think about the timeline. Really think about it. Grish is young. Too young for a child that has apparently existed for years, tracked through hospital records, waiting patiently in Armenia to be claimed. The math does not work for Grish. It works for someone a generation older. It works for Leo. Picture what that means. Leo, decades ago, somewhere far from this family, far from the woman who would eventually become his wife, made a choice, or had a choice made around him that resulted in a child he never claimed. That child grew up somewhere else, in Russia, without a father, without a name, without anyone ever coming to find him, until now, until this exact moment when the family's attention is entirely consumed by Grish's accident. giving this revelation the perfect cover to slip in almost unnoticed. That is not bad writing. That is precision. This show buried its biggest secret directly underneath its most emotional distraction, and it worked, because we were all looking at the hospital bed instead of the phone call sitting quietly beside it. Now bring Manana back into focus, because her reaction suddenly makes a different kind of sense. What if Manana has known about this child, or at least suspected something like it for years? What if her ferocious defensiveness, her constant readiness to fight anyone who threatens this family's image, isn't about protecting her children at all? Not really. It's about protecting a version of her marriage that she has spent decades convincing herself is true. A woman who built her entire identity around loyalty to a man who might have betrayed that loyalty before their story even properly began. That would explain everything. It would explain why she cannot forgive anyone else's mistakes, because forgiving them would mean acknowledging that mistakes like this exist, and she cannot afford to open that door, not even a crack, because behind it is something she has spent her whole life refusing to look at directly. Now think about Ina, standing in that hallway, delivering one of the sharpest lines of the entire episode, accusing Hunan's family of a habit of placing blame on other people's shoulders instead of their own. On the surface, that's an attack on Hunan specifically, but rewatch it with fresh eyes. Ina wasn't just talking about Hunan. She was talking about the entire family structure, the entire inherited pattern, and there's a very real possibility she already knows exactly where that pattern originates. What if Ina has information about Leo that nobody else in that hallway has access to? What if her calm, controlled composure throughout an evening where everyone else fell apart wasn't detachment? It was knowledge. People who already know the ending don't panic the same way people do when they're still waiting to find out. Now let's talk about David, because his storyline this episode might be the most important piece nobody's paying attention to yet. David turns on his own father with a rage that feels disproportionate to the moment, blaming him directly for what happened to Grish. On the surface, that's grief talking, fear talking, a son lashing out because he needs somewhere to put his terror. But what if David's anger runs deeper than this one night? What if some part of David has always sensed that his father is not entirely who he presents himself to be, and this accident simply gave him permission to finally say it out loud? Watch his father's response closely in the next episode. An innocent man defends himself with specifics. A guilty man defends himself with generalities, with phrases like, "We trust the life we've lived," vague, sweeping, designed to end the conversation rather than answer it.
Here's the structure I expect the next episode to follow, and I want you to remember I said this before it airs. It opens in the hospital, tense, silent, the family fractured into smaller groups, the way families do when nobody trusts each other enough to sit together. Grish stabilizes, maybe even wakes briefly, disoriented, saying something that sounds like nonsense to everyone in the room, except one person. That person is going to be Leo, and the look on Leo's face when he hears it is going to be the first real crack we see in his armor all season. Because Grish, before the crash, in the middle of that fight with Anya, in the middle of that call with Hunan screaming down the line, saw something, received something, a message, a document, something that connects directly to this child in Russia, something that makes Grish, even in his half-conscious state, understand exactly what his father has been hiding. And this is where the story turns completely on its head. Because the child from Russia isn't the twist. The child from Russia is the bait. The real twist is the woman attached to him, the mother, the one who has waited years, silently, patiently, for a man who never came back for her. She is coming to Armenia. Not to negotiate, not quietly through lawyers or intermediaries, but in person, standing at the door of this family's home, ready to say out loud everything Leo has spent decades making sure nobody ever had to hear. Think about what that does to every relationship in this house. Manana, who has spent this entire season insisting her family's suffering comes entirely from outside forces, from Hunan's mistakes, from Ina's coldness, from anyone but the man she married, is about to discover that the deepest wound in this family was sitting across the breakfast table from her the entire time. Hunan, who has been blamed and shamed and treated as the source of every catastrophe this family has endured, is about to watch the spotlight swing violently in a direction nobody expected, toward the one man who was never questioned. David, whose anger at his father felt disproportionate this episode, is about to find out his instincts were right all along, and that the family he's been trying so hard to hold together was never as solid as he believed. And Grish, lying in that hospital bed, recovering physically while his entire understanding of his family quietly falls apart, is going to become the unlikely center of all of it, the one person who knows the truth before anyone else does, and has to decide whether revealing it saves this family or finally, permanently destroys it. Here's the part that should genuinely worry you if you've been rooting for this family to find peace. Every single storyline this season, Hunan's guilt, Manana's fury, David's fear, Ina's coldness, Anya's determination to be seen, all of it has been circling the same unspoken center this entire time. Not a car accident, not a fight over money or Federation politics, a man who left behind a child decades ago and built an entire empire of family loyalty on top of that silence, hoping nobody would ever dig deep enough to find it. Someone finally has. And when that knock comes at the door, when a woman none of them have ever met stands there holding years of unanswered questions in her hands, the first person she is going to ask for isn't Grish, and it isn't Manana. She is going to ask for Leo, by name, like she has known exactly who he is this entire time.
Let's sit with that knock on the door for a second, because everything about this show has trained us to know that the quiet moments right before someone speaks are always the loudest. Leo is going to walk toward that door, not knowing yet that his entire carefully built life is standing on the other side of it. And when he opens it, when he sees her face, the show isn't going to need a single line of dialogue to tell us everything. His face is going to do it. The color draining, the hand freezing on the door frame, the silence that stretches just a second too long before he even tries to speak. That single frozen moment is going to be the most honest thing Leo has done in this entire series. Now think about who's standing behind him in that house when it happens, because that's where the real damage gets done. Manana is going to be somewhere close, maybe in the kitchen, maybe just coming down the stairs, and she is going to see her husband's face before she ever sees the woman at the door. And a wife who has spent decades reading every shift in her husband's expression is not going to need an introduction. She's going to know in that first second, before anyone explains anything, exactly what this means. Watch for that reaction to be almost eerily quiet, not screaming, not throwing anything. Manana has spent this whole season being loud, being sharp, being the one who fights back instantly. In this moment, I expect the opposite. I expect her to go completely still, because this is the one blow she never trained herself to survive. Here's where the story is going to widen out in a way nobody expects. This woman isn't coming to Armenia to destroy this family out of spite. She's coming because her son, the boy who has spent his entire life without a father, is the one who pushed her to finally do it. Somewhere in the earlier episodes, remember that detail about hospital records already sitting in Armenia, already found, already waiting to be sent? That wasn't bureaucratic detail for no reason. That means this boy has been actively searching, actively trying to trace where he came from for longer than anyone in this house realized. He is not a passive character in this story. He is the one driving it forward, and he is going to arrive with far more information about Leo's past than Leo has ever prepared himself to answer for. Now bring Hunan back into the center of this, because his storyline is about to shift in a direction that changes how we see everything he's done this entire season. Hunan has been treated as the reckless one, the dangerous one, the man everyone blames first whenever something goes wrong in this family. But watch what happens once this secret breaks open. Suddenly, the family is going to need someone to hold things together while Leo's authority collapses, and Hunan, of all people, might be the one who steps into that gap. Not because he's changed overnight, but because chaos has always been the environment Hunan operates best in. When everyone else is falling apart, he becomes strangely steady. Expect the next stretch of episodes to slowly rebuild Hunan's image, not by making him innocent. He's made real mistakes and this show isn't going to pretend otherwise, but by showing that his mistakes were never the deepest rot in this family. They were just the loudest.
Ina's role in all of this deserves a second look too. If she already suspected something about Leo, and I believe she did, then her sharp comment about this family's habit of blaming everyone but themselves wasn't just an attack on Hunan in that moment. It was a warning shot aimed at the entire house, one that nobody was paying close enough attention to catch. Expect Ina to become the character who says the quiet part out loud once the secret is fully exposed. The one person willing to look directly at Leo and ask the question everyone else is too afraid to voice. How long have you known this boy existed? And why did you let your own family destroy each other over smaller lies while you were sitting on the biggest one? Now, think about David again, because his anger at his father in the hospital hallway is going to look completely different in hindsight once this woman arrives. That wasn't disproportionate rage from a frightened son. That was a man whose instincts had already picked up on something wrong long before the rest of the family caught up. Expect David to be the one who confronts Leo most directly once the truth is fully out. Not with shouting, but with something colder, something closer to grief, because losing respect for a parent hits differently than losing patience with one. And then there's Grish, still recovering, still physically weak, but suddenly holding a piece of knowledge that makes him more powerful in this family than he's ever been. Whatever he saw or received right before that crash connects directly to this child, this woman, this secret. Expect the next episode to reveal exactly what that was. A message, a photo, a document forwarded to him by someone trying to warn the family before it was too late. Someone who may have been trying to reach Leo directly and got Grish by mistake. That single accident of timing may end up being the reason this secret ever came out at all. Here's the twist underneath the twist, the part I don't think anyone watching has considered yet. What if this woman from Russia isn't a stranger to this family the way everyone assumes? What if she has crossed paths with someone in this house before, without either of them realizing the connection at the time? Think back through the season. Think about every unnamed voice on the phone, every unexplained visitor, every moment where a character seemed to recognize something they shouldn't have. This show has been laying pieces down all season that nobody thought mattered. They mattered. By the time the truth is fully out in the open, this family is not going to look anything like it did at the start of this season. Manana is going to have to decide whether decades of loyalty were built on a foundation that never really existed. Hunan is going to have to decide whether he wants to keep being the family's designated villain or finally let someone else carry that weight for once. David is going to have to decide what kind of son he wants to be to a father he no longer fully recognizes. And Leo, the man who spent this entire story managing everyone else's chaos so carefully, is finally going to have to sit in a room and answer for his own. The last image I expect to close this stretch of episodes on is simple, and it's going to hit harder than any accident, any hospital bed, any argument the show has given us so far. Leo sitting alone, the house emptied out around him, the woman and her son gone for the night, Manana somewhere upstairs with the door closed, and for the first time in this entire series, nobody is coming to check on him.